Peace, love, knowledge, and freedom as always, and welcome to another episode of Frail Conversations. Today, we will be discussing a specific chapter from the book called Mama's Baby, Initial Emasculation. The reason why I want to go ahead and talk about this chapter is because, I kind of want to go ahead and get the shit out of the way, because it's like, when it comes to, our masculinity and whatnot, we put the onus on women a lot. You feel me? We put the onus on women a lot. We say it's a woman's fault for this. A woman's supposed to be holding us down. They're supposed to build us, all of this other shit. And, I guess that has its relevance to some. I don't particularly co-sign it, but I get where that's coming from. As men, we're supposed to protect and provide. Women are supposed to nurture and sustain. So we kind of feed into that, double-edged sword, because women can in one breath tell us, we need y'all to protect and provide it. They're not willing to nurture and sustain it. So we kind of put that forward as our focal point. Like, women are supposed to do for us, not necessarily be a catalyst for us, but do for us. And we have internalized that. And because of that, that's where a lot of the emasculation comes from. But that emasculation, of course, it extends from our upbringing. It extends from the home. Now, this is gonna go for those raised by their mothers alone, and it's gonna have some relevance with those still with their fathers in the home too. It's two different dynamics and it's two different perspectives. But like I said, I want to go ahead and get this out of the way, because going forward, Frail Conversations are gonna be more rooted in accountability pieces. That's the whole point of Frail, is an accountability piece, and it's a call to reform, because we put the onus on everything but ourselves. I get that certain things can start the cycle, but the moment you identify the cycle, it's time for you to break it, and identify exactly what's going on and make the change within yourself, So it's we can't blame women for our shit every time, we can't blame women for our shit every time. So with that, we're going to be going over things such as, of course, emasculation, love, coddling, our own relationships with women, love and hate, forgiveness. Forgiveness is a big one, because we definitely gotta touch up on that shit, because a lot of us are holding in the pain that a woman in our life has caused when we were young, and we have transitioned that, and it kind of manifests in all of our relationships, because it becomes a normalcy for us. So yeah, we'll be going over that, healing, broken hearts. A lot of these things that come from our interaction with women that, started in the basis of where we come from, what our upbringing is. And again, it don't apply, so let it fly. You know what I mean? If this doesn't apply to you, if you don't have, what a lot of this stuff is talking about, then cool. You don't have to come off sideways with it, but as the old heads say, a hit dog gonna holler. So I'm not, trying to, be combative, argumentative, anything like that, but I just express my thoughts. And in the Frail book, I go in depth with it in the chapter, Mama's Baby, Initial Emasculation, because I need sisters to see going forward. My purpose is not necessarily us and, the elders. They already had their chance. We are on our chance right now. We need to make the change. And it's those who want to change, they can do it. But we have a future generation of boys that are about to be growing up and coming into this world. And they need to understand what they're dealing with. And whether you're raising a son by yourself, or you're raising them, with the man, or whatever the case may be, as a woman, these are certain things that still need to be considered and understood whenever you're raising your son, because it can have, detrimental effects in the long run. And it can be the focal point that kind of emasculate them. So before we get heavy into it, of course, as always, follow me on Instagram at _just_scene_. Be sure to follow the merchandise page at Just Scenes Merch, and be sure to follow my vegan class at the Hitting It Raw program. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Oh yeah, and don't forget to visit IamJustSeen.com. There, you can get all things Just Seen. You want to add the Frail series to your library? Visit IamJustSeen.com. You want to learn how to master the market for serious trading and investing? Visit IamJustSing.com. You want to get your hands on some exclusive merch like tees, hoodies, coffee mugs, hats, bags? Visit IamJustSing.com. Are you thinking about transitioning into the plant-based lifestyle? Visit IamJustSing.com. You ever want to just chat with Sing about anything from simple advice to mentorship? Visit IamJustSing.com. Anything and everything that is me, you can find at IamJustSing.com. So just take a quick peek into my world and see why being just seen is nothing less but always more. Because you never really know what you need until you see it. You will never see it unless you visit IamJustSing.com. All right, welcome back. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, so we're gonna kick it off with emasculation. We're gonna start with that topic from the beginning because I think that kind of sets the tone for everything else and how everything else falls in. But first, let me explain that when I'm saying emasculation, I'm not saying you are making your son, or you have made your son, or you are attempting to make your son act as a woman. That's not what I mean when I say emasculate. Just like in the book, I actively defined it as emasculation going to be used from two different perspectives interchangeably. So when I say emasculate, it's going to relate to one of these two definitions. It's either going to mean to castrate or to be deprived of or lacking strength or vigor. It's going to be from one of those two dynamics. So keep that in mind as, we go forward and we explain and expound upon, emasculation. Not like, and also let me say this too before I get into it. I should have said this in the intro. This is not me saying that I hate my mother. This is not me saying that I got a problem with my mother, anything like that, because a lot of times the perception is that a man who responds a certain way, he hates his mama, or a man who feels a certain way, he has issues with his mama. I don't want that to come off like that is the case now, but me speaking on this right now is important. That's why I want to go ahead and get it out of the way, because I don't want any naysayers talking about some dumb shit that really has nothing to do with anything, because it happens a lot. If a man responds to a woman a certain way, say from a point of accountability or a point of correction, in a sense, it's the attack towards him, saying he has a problem with his mom, he has a problem with the women in his family. Nah, men should be able to hold women accountable, and men should be able to set a standard and, correct what they see as a wrong that a woman is doing, just the same as y'all should be able to do it to us, because y'all do. So with that being said, I just want to go ahead and get that out there right now, because I've had that conversation several times, and I feel like this should be my last time having that conversation. But anyway, back to the emasculation. So when I say that we're emasculated by our mothers, especially if we're raised by single mothers, first, I'm not speaking on that, devoid of the fact that the father is not there. The direct action in which a mother emasculates her son is the direct cause of the father's absence. And that comes about because when a son becomes a man, or even when he comes into in his teenage years, we begin to pick up tendencies and we begin to pick up mannerisms. We begin to become young men. Our voices get deeper, we get a little bit stronger and shit like that. And a woman has to assert and maintain her household. If there's no man there, she has to assert and maintain her household. And the son needs to know the hierarchy there. And being raised in a system, or not a system, being raised in a household structure in which there's no father there, there's no man, there's going to be no masculinity to quell the masculinity that's boiling up within the son. So the mother has to do two things. She has to shift to her masculine side, to keep and completely suppress her feminine side, because now she has a son that she has to maintain authority over. And there's other ways of doing that, because I mentioned in Frail too about respect being to love. Respect is to men what love is to women. But rather than maintaining respect for boys and maintaining respect for our sons, we invoke fear instead, because we don't want them to get to that point where we can't control them anymore. Because that's what we try to do. That's what happens. It's like, it's a common thing. I refuse to lose control over a son in my house. I refuse to let a son talk to me in my house this way or respond to me in this way. So this is where the emasculation begins. That right there is where the emasculation begins. And is it intentional? It's intentional, but is it malicious? Do you have ill intent with it? Probably not. You probably don't, but you need to understand that you have to maintain that structure. So to do that, you have to do certain things. And in those certain things, it creates a realm of where you're emasculating your child, where you're emasculating your son. The first instance that I've noticed that it happens and shit is naturally when we hit puberty and shit, and our voices get deeper. We can't control that shit. You feel what I'm saying? We can't control our voices deepening. However, in the assertion of, and even fathers in the home can do it too. They'll do it to their son too. If you ever tell your son he got too much bass in his voice, like, you're going to do one of two things to him. You're going to make him either not speak, or he's going to soften his voice. Because this is a natural transformation that is happening to him, and then when he gets ready, and now in addition to that, if you're telling him he has too much bass in his voice because he's expressing a thought, like, you're stripping him of his ability to express himself, and I get it. We grew up, in positions where, one, children are seen and not heard. That's the first fucked up quandary, and then another one is, a child is not supposed to speak or express themselves, the way that they feel on the inside. Fix your face. If you keep crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. It's little subtle shit like that makes us, that starts to invoke fear. And as we get older, as men naturally, especially in the teenage years, everybody has that rebellious phase, and in that rebellious phase, we kind of start to want to define ourselves, but it gets suppressed, and it gets completely, I don't even know what the word is right now that I'm trying to say, but when it gets suppressed, it's hidden, and we can't do anything about it, and I understand why it happens. If you're raised, if you're raising a child and you don't have a man in the home and you're raising a son, you have to do certain things to, like I said, maintain that authority. But at some point, a quandary comes in. Like, so what do? Are you going to lose control over your child, or are you going to set, like, that's the only other outcomes. You're going to lose control over your child, or you're going to set a standard to where your child becomes controlled in the world, based off of certain dynamics that play out. So, from the emasculation, that's one dynamic of it. That's the first dynamic of emasculation. That's asserting, the authority, asserting the dominance, and forcefully doing it, doing it devoid of respect. Like, we talk about, respecting our elders, but why don't the elders ever have to respect the youth? You can hear the way a mother speaks to her son sometimes, and it's like, if he spoke back to her that same way, it'd be like, yo, that's disrespectful. But it's the pass is for the adult, because it's like, yo, I'm an adult. That doesn't give you the pass to talk to another motherfucking human being like that. But that's the role that we accept, and that's what we choose to put upon ourselves. So when it comes to that emasculation, when it comes to that perspective, it's like, what are you doing to your son when you're not allowing them to have their voice? What are you doing to your son when you're not allowing him to express himself and what his emotions are feeling? So that's another part of emasculation. That's another part of emasculation completely, killing our emotions. Our responses to shit is through what we're feeling. And when we're not able to feel that shit, we're gonna take on certain emotions that just make us rebel. You know, in a rebellious state, the emotions that we're allowed to exhibit, as I was stating in the last conversations, are anger, rage, and aggression. So, right, if you've been stripping me, if you've emasculated me, and the only emotions that I'm able to operate from that are, you know, that make me manly are anger, rage, and aggression, what the fuck you think is going to happen when I reach my breaking point? You know, what you think is going to happen when I reach my breaking point? And that is something that women already know could happen. And that's how emasculation happens, because I have to stop that before it does. But in your attempt to try to stop it before it does happen, you're kind of pushing it and making it happen more. You know, you're pushing it and making it happen more. That's why it's, if you know that that's going to happen, and you know that your son could turn out this way, a woman is going to take two different polarities on which way she's going to go. She's going to go through the forceful aspect in that way of emasculation, or she's going to emasculate him through coddling him. You know, she's going to emasculate him through coddling him and making him soft. You know, and again, in when I'm speaking on soft, I'm not even, let me rephrase. I'm not going to say soft. I'm going to say passive. You're going to create a passive through coddling. You're going to create a passive man. Your son is going to grow up to be a passive man. I mean, I hear it all the time. You know, women say, I want my son to be sensitive. I want my son to be, you know, able to deal with women, you know, but it's a fine line between that, because you're still not a man. A man has to teach him how to have that soft, compassionate side for a woman. He has to see how it's done from a man's perspective. He has to see how it's done as a man. Otherwise, he's going to exhibit it. He's going to create it as a woman from the feminine perspective if he's already emasculated. Now, this ain't got nothing to do with sexual orientation or sexual preference. I'm speaking from an essence perspective. You know, he's not going to do it from the masculine perspective of the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of analysis and deconstruction. He's going to do it from the feminine perspective of the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiments of the essence of synthesis and construction. You feel me? That's where he's going to do it from. So our mothers, if they're not emasculating us forcefully, you know, through the, you know, I wish you would threats, and, you know, take some of that bass out your voice. You know, those are threats that invoke fear of something that is naturally within me. You know, and then it's like the provoking part. It's like, I wish you would is a threat that puts you in a fucked up quandary. It puts you in a fucked up quandary, because to hear that from your mother, you know, I get from that perspective, you're trying to maintain your household. But as a child hearing that, I wish you would, you're giving me an ultimatum that, you know, I will not act on. And that's where the level of emasculation comes in. Because let's take it out of that. You know, and let's say you put him in a street scenario. You put him in a scenario where he's now forced to respond that way. And somebody says, I wish you would. You know, how's he going to respond? How's he going to respond to that? You know, it's like, oh, well, it's different because, you know, I'm his mother. That doesn't mean you should be able to do that shit. That doesn't mean you should do it. You feel what I'm saying? Like there's other methods to get through to your child. You know, that start with respect. You're not gonna maintain that and keep that relationship by trying to invoke fear, because when he's 18, when he leaves the house and he doesn't come back, then it's gonna be like, okay, now my child don't love me. You can't force love into a child who internalizes that you may have hated them. You know, and they internalize it based off of the actions. You know, if you speak to me like somebody off the street speaks to me, and I don't, and it's somebody that I may be beefing with, you feel what I'm saying? Like just imagine that. If I'm on the streets and I got beef with somebody and they say, I wish you would. But then I'm in my own house and it's somebody that I'm not beefing with and they say, I wish you would. You feel what I'm saying? Your unconscious mind sees a different polarity, you know, and that's something that, you know, we internalize. So we got that perspective. And then if we're coddled versus loved, you know, and that's a blurred line. That's a very blurred line, because a lot of women think they're loving their sons and they're really just coddling them. You know, when your son can't be self-sufficient, you know, when he can't be self-proficient, you know, he needs you to do everything for him. and you continue to do everything for him, you're coddling him. You're coddling him, and not only are you coddling him, you're crippling him for life. Because now when he grows up and he moves forward, he's going to have a woman that's just like you. So I get it. It's funny as shit when they be like that the monster-in-law shit, how the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law are always beefing. You know why they always beefing? Because they're just the fuck alike. They're just alike. But they don't know that they're just alike simply because, one has to, because they don't know that they're alike because of the imagery that they're putting up. The daughter-in-law is going to be on her best behavior. The mother-in-law is going to be on her best behavior. They're going to put on the front of who they want to be and who they want to be seen as. But the son has already made the distinction that those two are just alike because his attraction is based off of his mother's interaction with him. It's no different than a daughter. A daughter is going to find her father in the man that she's with. Now, whether that father is present or absent, a daughter is still going to find her father in the man that she's with. Same with the man. We're going to find our mother in the woman that we get with. So when your son brings a woman home and you say you don't like her, she's this, she's that, and he's like, oh, mom, she ain't that bad. She's probably just like you. She's probably just like you, and then it crosses the line when you start to hear the stories about, she speaks to your son this way. She talks crazy like this to your son and he just lets her. I can't believe. Why do you think he lets her do it? Why do you think he lets her do it? Because it's familiarity. It's comfort. It's what he experienced growing up. You see what I'm saying? And so he's going to find his mother in his wife. He's going to find his mother in the woman that he's going to spend the rest of his life with. Why? Because he's already spent all his life with his mother. You feel what I'm saying? So when you start coddling your son and you cripple him, he's going to find a woman that, this is why women get involved with men who have to be built up. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, why can't she just hold me down? Why can't she just, because my mama did it for me my whole life. But with my father absent, I never knew that there was a point or there was shit that I was supposed to do my damn self. That there was supposed to be man shit that I was supposed to be doing. So although I'm speaking in this context is about, directly towards sisters raising sons, like I said, it is a function of fathers being absent or fathers being present and not doing what the fuck they're supposed to be doing. Because the son finds his mother. Religious texts may say the man that finds a wife finds a good thing, but if we take that to another level, the man that finds a wife, he found his mother in her. So if you are looking at your son, his girlfriend, his wife, the girls that he bring home, and you feel like, oh, I don't like them. I don't like, because they're you. High key and low key, they're you, and you can't face that. You might not be able to face that. Now, granted, you do have the other polarities where some men get with women that are complete opposite to get back at their mother for whatever it was. But on the grand scheme of things, you're going to find your mother in the woman that you're with. And so if she's talking reckless to you on a regular basis, if your mother here is talking reckless, she's like, why you let her talk? You're not going to tell your mom she talked to me like that because you talked to me like that. Like when you were upset at things, when you like, this is how you responded to me. So this is the relationship that I attracted. This is what I gravitated towards. So it's like, you gotta find that line of knowing the difference between love and coddling. See, with love comes correction. With love comes correction. With coddling comes crippling. If you love somebody, you're going to give them the correction. You're going to, not only for them, but you're going to correct the things in yourself that are going to lead to their correction too. But with coddling is going to be, oh, come here, baby, I'm going to fix it. Come here, baby, I'm going to do this for you. And he's going to seek that in a woman. So now, you're creating a man for women, for a woman to be with who now needs that. So the only way that his relationships are going to be viable is if the woman takes care of him. If the woman takes care of him, and that's a part of how we become emasculated, And now we can take it back to We can take it back to times of slavery. Um, and we have to consider that in the dynamic too, because there was a time when coddling had to be done. It doesn't have to be done anymore, but it had to be done to keep the son alive, you know, because the greatest fear on the plantation was a masculine individual. Because, you know, as I said, masculinity is the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of analysis and deconstruction. When my masculinity kicks in, if I see that this is bullshit, I'm gonna react accordingly. I'm going to react accordingly through my rationale, through my analysis and deconstruction as I break it down. So you had to coddle the sons to strip them of that masculine principle. To now I have to depend upon my mom. Now I have to, let me see what she tells me to do. Let me see what she says. I got to move how she wants me to move to keep me from going down a certain route, to keep me from responding a certain way, you know? So that becomes transgenerational. And when it becomes transgenerational, it starts to infuse into our psyche. So now we do this on a regular basis, you know, which is crazy because we prepared our daughters for womanhood. You know, we prepared our daughters to be mature and operate in their feminine to the highest capacity, but we didn't necessarily teach our sons that. We diluted them, you know. So it's like when our sons, you know, when it's time for them to fly away, it's like, oh, we can't let it happen. You know, you're not ready for that. I'm going to continue to do this for you. I'm going to continue to do that for you. And it sets the tone. Like I said, it sets the tone, and that's how the relationships come about. You know, so like I was saying, your relationship is going to be fueled off of the son's relationship is going to be fueled off of his relationship with his mama. So now you have to ask yourself, does he love his mama or does he hate his mama? And there's a blurred line between that because a lot of people think that hatred is always going to be evil. It's always going to be dark. But see, love and hate are energies, and they're energies off the opposite side of the same coin. You feel what I'm saying? So love and hate are developed and manifested based off of how a person processes emotions, and they created their personal identity. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how familiar, you know, many people are with chakra energies or whatnot, but I'm going to give a quick breakdown on, you know, what chakras represent, just up until the point of love and hate. So your first chakra is your root chakra, of course. Second is sacral. Third is solar plexus. And the fourth is the heart, right? So from the root chakra, that's your foundation. That's where your livelihood is set, you know, where you feel safe and secure. That's where that's set. And then your sacral chakra is where your emotions are, your emotions and feelings and your sexuality. That's where that's understood. Your third chakra, your solar plexus, is where your personal identity resides. And your fourth chakra is where love is. But see, like I said, love has a opposite polarity, which is hate, and they're same sides of the opposite side of the same coin. So if in your foundational upbringing, root chakra energy, you learn to rationalize emotions, because emotions, there's only two. You have pain and joy. Everything else is a feeling that leads you back to one of those 2 points. So negative emotions are going to lead you to pain. Positive emotions are going to lead you to joy. You feel what I'm saying? So if you're in your foundational space, the emotions that you exhibited the most were pain, then your third chakra energy, your personal identity, it will be established under painful circumstances. Or your personal identity will be established under joyous circumstances, depending on how you internalize emotions within your foundation, which will then determine which polarity you're going to operate from when it comes to your heart energy. Is it going to be love or hate? If your personal identity was created by or being in the realm of emotions that rooted in pain, you're going to live through hate. If your personal identity was established off of the joy perspective because you were always around positive emotions, then you're going to operate from love. And again, I'm not talking about hatred as in, you know, hating people. I'm talking about from the power of the opposite polarity of love, same energies and shit. So you have to ask yourself, how were you brought up? And, you know, for the sisters, like, what environment was the internalization of the person identity built? Was it from pain or was it from joy? You know, not do I have joyous moments, not do I have abundance of painful moments, but collectively, most of the situations that I built on, where did they come from? You know, most of the time, and if you are emasculating your son, chances are that he created a personal identity that was rooted from the pain of that. You know, that's because the emasculation, whether it was intentional or direct, like you had to do certain things that silenced who he was, that silenced his personal preference for life. Like imagine you're growing up, you're transitioning into puberty, and your voice gets deeper, and every day you're expressing yourself, someone tells you you got too much bass in your voice, tone it down. So it's like I'm not able to vocalize what I want, and it's like we wonder why the arguments are so hectic, because I've been holding it in for so long. And it gets to a point where I don't give a fuck how you feel. I have to say what I gotta say. Is he being disrespectful? Not really. It comes off disrespectfully because of the way that we respond. But at the same time, how long have I held that in? How long has that been bottled in within me? You feel what I'm saying? Am I just a shaken soda that finally exploded, and you knew nothing about it because you kept shaking the soda?
Hey, huddle up, broskies, because it's time to elevate. The secret to evolving masculinity is to define it, understand it, then apply it. The So Frail series defines masculinity as the spiritual, mental, and physical embodiment of the essence of analysis and deconstruction. From this definition, I explain how masculinity is not just the hat that we wear, but it's the essence that we must exude through application. If you enjoy the So Frail conversations, why not read the books that inspire them? Visit IamJustSeen.com right now to add the So Frail series to your library to get a better understanding of what masculinity really is. I promise, after reading So Frail, you will never look at masculinity the same again.
You know? Like, those things got to be considered. Because it's like every time I turned around, every expression, every perspective in which I was building my personal identity in myself, that's going to determine how I operate. So this is why it's like you have to ask yourself, does your son love or hate you? And you have to ask yourself, do you love and hate your mama? Just because you can consciously say, I love this person, does not necessarily mean you love that person. You feel what I'm saying? And just because you can feel as if you may hate that person, you may not hate that person. You may just dislike aspects that resonate within you. But if you're continually telling yourself that you love a person that you truly hate, pay attention to who you fall in love with. You'll fall in love with people you'll fall in love with people who are doing things that you naturally hate. Like, how can you end up in a relationship with somebody who's really not for you? Like, how can you end up in a relationship with somebody who you can consciously say they're bad for you? They do so many different things, but somehow you love that person. I love them through their flaws. No, you love your mother in that person. You love the mother in that person, and the flaws that you're loving them through are the very things about your mom that you hate, that you have to come to terms with, that you're in denial about, because it's like, you know, we hear societal things of that's still your mother, or regardless of what happened, you know, you have to love through that. You don't have to. You have to learn how to get through it and deal with it and face that, you know, and that becomes problematic because a lot of mothers necessarily don't want to, they don't want to face that. They don't want to face that because it's a difficulty in blurring the line with, it's a difficulty in blurring the line in which it comes from my expression of you as a person versus my expression of you as a parent, you know? And when those lines get crossed, that's when it blows up. That's when it significantly blows up, because it's like when I'm coming to you as a person who's done something wrong to me, or a person who made me feel a certain type of way, then you want to run the guilt on me. Well, I did the best I could. Well, what about your father? He wasn't here. You know, that is something that is faced a lot. You know, I get that, you know, my father may not have been there. We get that part, or that he didn't help, but that doesn't take away what we were felt at your hands, you know, or what may have been felt at your hands. And at the same token, because of that very thing. This is a very, very important thing because I see this happen a lot. You cannot put everything on your mother. And what I mean by putting everything on your mother, the very angers that you feel, the very pains that you feel about your father, that you want to express to him, express them to him and stop dumping them off on your mother, because we dump them off on our mothers because it's safe. We know you're going to forgive us. We know you're going to, we can apologize. We know we can say whatever we're going to say, because in that token, we don't know your pain threshold. That's something that we really got to take a step back and acknowledge. You need to start to figure out what your mother's pain threshold is before you start snapping on her, before you start spazzing on her, before you decide, I got to tell her how I feel. You feel what I'm saying? Because we have this invincible mentality about our parents, especially about our mothers. Like they don't feel pain. And part of that is in the strength that they had to exhibit. You probably never seen your mama cry. She put up that much strength that you don't even think that she's soft. So you can say whatever you want to, this is how my upbringing was, but you won't say that shit to your daddy. Make whatever excuse you want. Oh, he wasn't there, so I can't call him, I can't do it. But even if you did, you would rather try to make a reconciling relationship with him before you would reconcile with the person that was there, because she's safer. You can dump whatever it is you want to on her. You can say whatever it is that you want to say to her comfortably, without the fear, without the repercussion, because she's going to forgive you. But you don't even have the comfort to say that with your dad. And he's the one that you're really angry with. He's the one that you're really angry with, and everything that falls into how you're expressing towards your mother is based off of what you want to say to him or what you could say to him. That's something that really got to stop, because it's like she has her part. She has her part. So blame her or put on her the shit that she did. That's hers. You feel me? Don't let your internal anger for that person come out towards your mother, because she's not that person. You got to take that beef up with that person. You got to take that beef up with that person. So it's like, we gotta take that step to learn the processes necessary to overcome that. To overcome that. Like, I get it. Like, it's okay. Like, be angry. Whatever it was that, she did to you, cool. But face that. Face that with her, and then learn to forgive. Not forget. You gotta fucking forgive. We keep getting on this dumb shit of, we internalize forgiveness as we have internalized forgiveness as forgetting shit and reconciling. And that shit still stays there and it still lingers. Oh, no, I don't even think about that shit no more. I forgot about that. I'm going to reconcile with you. No, forgiveness and reconciliation ain't got shit to do with each other. You feel me? You forgive and you let go of the burden and the pain. But see, we try to forget that shit and then we reconcile, and all we do is let it fester, and then it keeps coming back. So then when we get angry, we be like, yo, but remember when you did this when I was, damn, thought you forgave me for it. No, I forgot and we reconciled. I forgot and we reconcile. Because when you truly forgive, you don't bring that shit back up. When you truly forgive, it's done. You feel what I'm saying? And I think as a whole, like, because we not really tapped into emotions and we don't choose to, we don't want to sit, with our mothers and discuss that shit. We don't want to sit with those emotions and discuss that shit. And then on the other side of that, our mothers sometimes don't want to sit with us because they have to realize that we are angry. We are upset. We are holding into certain things, and they did the best they could. They did the best they could. And for them, it's going to come off as a personal attack on them, on their parenting, as opposed to me expressing how I'm feeling or me trying to heal and make amends. And so we can move forward. It's like they're going to see it as a personal attack, and nobody's going to get anywhere because we're going to shut down, because as we're trying to express, then we may have to deal with your father didn't do X, Y, Z, but we're not talking about him right now. We know that he's not there. We're talking about, when it comes to my relationships, why do I respond this way? When it comes to my interaction with women, why do I only deal with these type of women? It's like the women that you attract to the most, even if they have toxic tendencies, if they have, things that you don't like, if there's something to the core, you're attracted to them because they remind you of your mama. Because there's something in them that you're connected to them, that is a synchronicity between them and your mom. And until you understand that, you have to heal what it is about your mom that you had to deal with the most. It's going to keep showing up. Then it's also going to multiply if you have sisters, because then the sisters are extensions of them. Like, this is a little tangent and stuff, but it's like, I don't know why it is like this in our culture, but a lot of times the daughters and the mothers are always clashing with each other. It's like, why? Like, why can't y'all be friends? Why can't y'all get and be cool with each other? And then when you get to the core of it, they're really just alike. They're just alike, but the parts that manifest the most are the parts within themselves that they haven't really made peace with, that they're still at odds with. So they're going to be at odds with anything that exhibits those behaviors. So it's like, you got a girlfriend, you brought a girlfriend home, or you're dealing with a woman who's just like your mama and just like your sister. But your mama and your sister don't like her. But then you tell your mama and your sister, yo, I got with her because she reminds me of y'all. They be like, no, she don't. Yes, she do. In more ways than you care to think or care to accept. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, that comes in from our relationship. That comes in from our relationship. And so when you look at your son involved with a woman that he's telling you is a lot like you, but you're in denial about it, but then you see how he's changing with her, or you see how he's doing certain things with her that you're like, you're not supposed to be doing that. Why is she making you do that? Why is she bringing this out of you? It was already there. These are the very things that happened to your son in the relationship with you growing up. I don't like the way she talked to my son. You might not like the way you talk to your son if you can hear you in a different light. But see, I'm his mother. I know. That's the thing. If you're his mother, that's going to be his wife and the mother of his kids. He needs a template. And as I said in Frail 2, children, they don't know good or bad. They know normalcy and habit. So if my normalcy and my habit was off of some argumentative shit on a regular basis, I'm going to find my normalcy in that. I'm going to be with the person who makes me feel normal. Whether that normal is good or bad, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to deal with somebody who makes me feel normal. You know what I'm saying? And so that's one of the things that we have to deal with, And as men, if you were raised like that, if you were raised by have that conversation. You gotta take that and have that conversation with your mother, if that is the case. And if you have taken a point to understand, yo, I may have done that to my son, have that conversation with him. And I'm telling my brothers and stuff to go ahead and initiate that, because if our mothers initiate it to us, we're gonna shut down. Nah, ma, you ain't do nothing. Nah, ma, you good. It was nothing. I'm not dwelling on that anymore. But you are, because now it's manifesting in your everyday life. A lot of abusive men wish they could hit their mama. Whether they admit that shit or not, they are responding to the women the way that they wish they could respond to their mamas. Imagine that. I've heard women who's had sons hit women, and it's like, son, I didn't raise you to ever put your hand on a woman. No, you raised me not to hit you back. You raised me not to put my hand on you. But you never taught me to not respond to women violently. Because this is the way that I would have responded to you had you not have been my mama. That's kind of a tough pill to swallow. I ain't even gonna lie. To know that, to internalize that, your son, I raised him never to hit women. I raised him never to put his hands on women. So how does he end up putting his hands on women? You gotta look at what is his response to that. Because as I said in the last conversation, sometimes I don't condone domestic violence, but sometimes a woman's words can hit harder than a man's fist. A woman's words can sometimes hit harder than a man's fist. And if I heard cutting words growing up, now cutting words don't necessarily mean you belittled your son or you came off slick. But if you spoke in tones or you spoke in manners that threatened him, that gave him ultimatums of what he should do, like goes back into what I was saying earlier about I wish you would. I wish you would put your hands on me. You gave him an ultimatum that emasculated him. Because you was fucked either way. You're fucked either way. Because either he does hit you, and now you lose all control over your household. Because, you can't beat my ass. That's one dynamic of it. But then he doesn't hit you, and now you just emasculate him. Now you just pretty much this is setting the tone up to be abused when he gets into a relationship with a woman. It's almost like a even polarity, an even connection to where a son has heard his mother say, "I wish you would put your hands on me," to dealing with a woman who constantly tells him to hit her. Yo, hit me. I bet you ain't gonna do it. Hit me. Like, it's a polarity. And then he just walks away from it. And then the mother would know that her son's going through this and say, "You don't have to deal with that. I did. All my upbringing, I had to deal with that shit. All my upbringing, I had to deal with that shit. So I'm going to continue to deal with it in my relationships." Why? Because it feels like home. It feels like home. So we got to start, looking at that more. Like I said, I'm not putting the onus and saying, we're like this or women are the cause of our emasculation. Oh, buddy, please believe I'm going to get in on us for the rest of the duration of the shit. But this is a very important piece, because you don't want to raise your son to be, it's like women are raising, it comes to a point where we have to start understanding that we've been raised to become the men somehow that our mothers don't like. The collective of women are complaining about the quality of men, but our mothers raised us this way. Women will say they can't find any good men, but look at their brother. That shows like how we've been conditioned and raised. I want a man that's why it's like, you gotta be very, very understanding of seeing beyond just protection and provision. You really got to see beyond just protection and provision. And if you're not seeing beyond protection and provision, that's just basic survival shit. So it's like, as long as I have a man who protects and provides and doesn't hit women, but what else does he do? Like, what kind of woman does he find? What kind of woman does he find? Your mother is your standard. Your mother is your standard. And if you hate your mama, if you hate your mama, or if you hate your mama, you love your mama, however it is that you feel about your mama, you are going to move accordingly. You're going to move like that. You're going to move accordingly. And you're going to find your relationships built under that. The women that you involve yourself with, they're going to be just like your mom. So if you in these relationships that are not viable or not working, and you go to the core, go to the source, go back to the roots and say, "Hey, look, mom, we need to talk," and truly talk. You feel me? Talk to her and let her know, come to terms with why she responded this way to you. And that's a very, and as a mother, if your son decides to come and talk to you about certain things, just listen to him. Listen to what he's saying. Don't deny his experience. This is what happened to me. This is me. Nobody cared about how I felt. Your kids stuck with you through the whole situation. They know how you felt. You can't deny their experience. As I said, if I say if the mother is broken, the children are cracked. You know, if the mother is broken, then the children are cracked. And it's too many broken women having cracked children. And then when the cracks break and they become broken too, it's like, well, I was broken. I know you were broken. So now let's figure out how to keep from being broken together. Like, but we need to talk about this. We need to get through the ugly phase. You know, we need to get to the phase. We need to get through the phase that's not always pretty. You know, the phase that has to put the pressure on a situation to make it become a diamond. You know, and we got to heal through that pain. You know, we got to heal through that pain. Just as they say, you know, a lot of women talk about their first heartbreak, you know, and it's always a guy that did it back in the day. He did something, he cheated, but a lot of times their first heartbreak is their father. And a lot of times the son's first heartbreak is his mother. But he couldn't break up with her. Not in the sense like they were together or anything like that, but that's a relationship you couldn't walk away from after your heart was broken. You know, that's a relationship you can't walk away from after your heart is broken. And when your heart is broken, you're never able to face it. If your mother ever broke your heart, whether it was small or big, if you've never healed from that, if y'all and you were never allowed to discuss what it was that she did, and it was like, if you did try to bring it up, there was some kind of argument or some kind of friction or some kind of problem, that's how you want to gravitate or into the next relationships like that. You know, we talk about after a breakup, you have a rebound, you know, and you just keep going to the next one and going to the next one. If your first breakup was within a relationship that, you know, you didn't even know you were in. Now, this is not don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about no incestual shit, but I mean in the sense that you could still have your heart broken by your family, and you also have to deal with that situation as a man if you broke your mother's heart. Let's not just put the onus on the women and put the onus on our mothers and act like they did everything to us. Now, you've done some shit that broke your mother's heart. Have you apologized to her for it? Have y'all healed from that? Or have you just, oh, well, I was a child, so children can do those things? And like, no, you can still break your mother's heart. As a child, you can still break your mother's heart, and you still broke her heart. You feel what I'm saying? And now it's all of this energy that's going on, brokenheartedness, just different things from upbringings and all that are intertwined within the relationship that is being built. And nobody wants to discuss it. But everybody wants to let's just keep pushing. Nobody's forgiving. Everybody's forgetting and reconciling. We're forgetting and reconciling. And look what the fuck is doing to the relationships on the outside. You know, so fuck a protection and provision. I don't give a fuck about that. Fuck nurturing and sustaining. I don't give a fuck about that. Like, because it has to be greater than that. Because we have to be able to be emotionally intelligent for that shit. You know? And then our emotional intelligence is off when we're on the spectrum of trying to do more than we should without healing. Without going through that phase of, let's get through this pain. Let's get through this situation. Let's truly understand what it is that we're dealing with. You know? So as I was saying, like, initial part of our emasculation is our relationship with our mother. You know? Emasculation isn't just making your son, you know, soft and frail and, you know, have these, that's deeper than what it is. The emasculation is the point that cuts him to keep him from tapping into his masculinity by being unable to understand his feminine component. Because his feminine component is his emotions and things of that nature. So if that's been stripped and that's been suppressed as well, it's going to be very, very difficult for any man to operate from his masculine perspective. He's going to be emasculated, you know? So when he comes for the healing, when he comes for the, you know, I need to get these emotions out, because if I can rationalize these emotions, that builds my masculinity. The polarity of masculine and feminine go with respectively the rational and the emotional minds. When emotions are involved, when I'm dealing with things emotionally, I need to be able to rationalize them. In order to face things emotionally, I need to be able to come and have conversations with them without feeling awkward. I need to be able to come and have conversations without being made to feel guilty about the shit that I'm bringing up. We have to listen to each other a lot more. Sons, parents, because if not, the emasculation is going to continue, because we're always going to be mama's baby. We're always going to be mama's baby. And that sets a tone for kind of some very destructive shit at times. Because no matter what was done to me, here's 2 points. No matter what was done to me, I'm not going to address it because that's still my mama. And no matter what I've done, I'm not going to apologize for. I'm not going to come and try to seek forgiveness and try to heal from, because I'm your son. I'm a child. I didn't ask to be here. I should still be able to do these things, and you automatically have to forgive me for it because I'm your child. And off the same token, parents feel like you should automatically forgive me because I'm your parent. I kept the roof over your head. I kept clothes on your back. I did things. Like, you can't guilt a child out of feeling their emotions. You cannot guilt a son out of feeling what he was feeling. You cannot guilt a son out of the emasculation that has been placed upon him. And it all ties back in, because this is all a direct cause of what happens when a father steps out of the fucking house. When you leave your motherfucking son alone to figure out life on his own and to be raised by a woman in the absence of you, this is what the fuck you got to deal with. There's a special place in hell for motherfuckers like that, whether you believe in hell or not. You feel what I'm saying? And you can't wait until you're in your 50s and 60s to say, I need to fix this relationship with my kids. And then try to come back and just start bearing gifts. Fuck your gifts. Fuck your gifts. You need to, as a man, you're going to be the focal point to help heal this. Because in the shit that you brought up and the shit that you caused, what you have done is you have allowed a full damaging function by stepping out. Now, I get it. It's the whole point of, well, I wasn't ready. You were ready. You were ready for it. You just weren't man enough. You didn't have your masculinity intact, because your analysis and deconstruction would have made the situation work for your kids. I walked out because of this. I was too young. I didn't you think about that shit before you conceive. You feel me? You got to think about that shit before you conceive. Otherwise, you just a bitch made motherfucker. Because when you do shit like that, you then break the mother. When you break the mother, you crack the kids. When you crack the kids, look at what the fuck happens in life. Now you just ran off. Now you older, and they've gone through all of this trauma all through their motherfucking life. And the only thing you got to say when you come back to try to fix your situation is some shit about, well, your mama kept me from y'all. The fuck? The fuck kind of shit is that? But again, that's an emasculated man. That's an emasculated man in his own. You feel me? That's an emasculated man in his own. If I can say something, even if that is the case, even if you did keep your son from his parent, even if you did keep him from his father, that's emasculation to not seek that son, to not seek that daughter, to not seek that child, and say, I need to be in their life. Fuck what you talking about. I need to be in their life. Oh, you don't want to give me custody? All right, we're going to go to courts with it. Too many motherfuckers. Emasculation, that's the easy way out. Too many motherfuckers got used to just getting put on child support. Fuck it, put me on child support. All right, now you got to eat that, because now you got to deal with that. Because in that, all of the shit that your kids want to do to you, all the shit they want to say to you, they do to the mother who was there for them. You get the pass for that shit. And they want the relationship so bad with you that when they actually meet you, they're still talking nice to you. They still saying certain shit to you to make you not feel all, because they don't want to run you away. We have given children more power than we have given adults. You know how many kids will say and not do certain shit because they don't want their parent to go a certain way? but it should be the other way around. You feel what I'm saying? So when it comes to that, yeah, our women, when we're raised by single women, we can become emasculated. Coming up in that structure, it can emasculate you. But it's a direct result of a father stepping out. The father was the bitch. The father was the coward who walked the fuck out. So even after that, even with the accountability piece, the onus is on the father. But the onus is still collectively on both of them because they chose to conceive their children. They chose to conceive the children.
And don't forget to take a moment to go get your exclusive merchandise from Just Scenes merch. At Just Scenes, each piece is specifically crafted with positive imagery and symbolism. From the titles and designs to the descriptions, each style gives you something to feel great about. With everything from hoodies and tees to coffee mugs and tote bags, we have something for the entire family. So be sure to get yours today. Find us on Instagram at Just Scenes merch and get your merchandise right now.
All right, so with that being said, I think we can kind of draw that to a close. Yeah, so when it comes to the initial emasculation, yeah, it starts when, it can start from a single parent home, being raised by your mother alone, but it's a matter of her doing what she has to do to maintain her household. So I understand, like you got to understand the perspective, whether you liked it or not. You have to understand it. We're in a state of perpetual survival. We're in a state of perpetual survival. So a woman not only has to, she now has to do man shit that she does not know how to do. She now has to carry a burden and a load all on her own. You feel what I'm saying? One thing we really got to also take into consideration is that our mothers are in fear. They're in states of fear when they're left alone. Fuck how strong you think she is. Fuck how strong she carries herself, whether she cries in front of you or not, whether, my mama the strongest person I know. Take a step back and realize how soft she is. And realize that raising children by herself, she was scared. She was in a perpetual state of fear. Every day. Every day. Imagine that shit. Just sit for a moment and imagine that from her perspective. You feel what I'm saying? A woman raising children by herself. This is 18 years of fear. Let's just say the father walked out. We're going to say halfway through. Some of them left, young. Let's just say he walked out halfway through, 9 years old. So he walked out 9 years old, and she is now having to do all of this stuff by herself. For 9 years, operating in a state of fear, what the fuck you think you're going to do? Just really think about that. You got to be able to put yourself in her shoes too. It's easy to force it upon them and say, well, she didn't do this. She could have did that. She could have did that. Put yourself in their fucking shoes. Put yourself in her shoes for 1 fucking second. And I'm going to tell you like this. You better put yourself in their shoes before you end up in the same fucking situation. Because last thing you want to do is say, Mama, I understand. Trust me. Because until you can forgive that shit, not just forget and reconcile, until you can forgive that, you're going to face it and you're going to be forced to forgive it because then you're going to understand. Then you're going to have that empathy behind it. You feel what I'm saying? Is it wrong? Yes, it's still wrong at the end of the day because it leads to the emasculation. You feel me? It leads to the emasculation. Because this is what she had to do. This is a part of the system. That's one of the points that they don't tell you about. Keep the father out of the home and, let the one, because now she's in a perpetual state of fear. Now she has to keep her son from becoming a certain thing. You feel what I'm saying? But we innately tap into that shit and we want to, bring it out of ourselves. So going forward, like We need to heal this shit. If you was raised, single mother, household, whatever the case may be, have a conversation with your mom. A real conversation. Whether y'all need a therapist as an intermediate, or whether y'all can, be mature enough to do it yourself. As a son, if you're raised without a father, if you're raised without your father, single have that conversation with her. As a mother who had to do that, have that conversation with your child, with your son. Daughters too. It's so frail, so we're just talking about men, but it's in general. Have these conversations, because that's the only way we're gonna get through it. And don't be afraid of what's gonna happen. Get through the hard shit first. Get through the hardest perceptions first. Get through the heartbreaks and the traumas and the issues first. But let it be from a point of healing, not a point of combat. Not a point of, well, this happened to me too. I didn't say nothing when you did it. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's going to make both parties shut down, and that's not what needs to happen. Both people need to be able to openly express what the fuck they're doing. And as the child, if your parent is apologizing to you, stop fucking saying shit like, yo, that ain't good enough, or I still wanted more. It's like, yo, they did the best they could. And as a parent, you feel what I'm saying? Stop assuming that they just have to let that shit go because you're the parent and you kept a roof over their head and shit. Feel me? It's a point that needs to come together so future generations can be raised better. You feel what I'm saying? And going forward for my sisters, when you're raising your sons, whether the father is in the home or not, when you're raising your sons, keep some of these things in mind, because there's natural things that you've probably seen growing up. There's natural things that you're probably going to want to do that really don't need to be done anymore. You know what I'm saying? They really don't need to be done anymore. Your son raising his voice or getting passionate about a conversation is not being disrespectful to you. If your children begin to speak to you as you spoke to them, and you're calling them disrespectful, you have to analyze how much you respect them. So with that said, be sure to follow me on Instagram at _just_scene_. Follow my merchandise page at Just Scenes Merch on Instagram as well, and follow my the vegan class, Hitting the Raw program. Also get all of the books. They're everywhere books are sold. So Frail, Reality, Black Male Masculinity. So Frail 2, Toxic Femininity. Hitting the Raw, Living a Raw, Plant-Based Lifestyle for Life. Also, if you want to leave donations, tips, whatever, you can do so by clicking in the description on the podcast. Take PayPal, Cash App, whatever you feel. Once again, as I said, I hope the nuggets have manifested. I hope this was something that, that everybody can relate to and understand. And whether you can't relate to it or understand, somebody who can. Until we meet again for the next conversation, I'm not going to release what the topic is going to be, but understand that So Frail conversations are going to get far more in depth, and we're going to cover so much. If you haven't had the books already, like I said, go ahead and get them, so that way you know what's being discussed and what we're talking about. See you on the next conversation, and have a good one. Peace, love, knowledge, and freedom.